if it's going to be anything that distracts the player from the game experience or degrades the game experience or comes off as being too pushy or too promotional or too intrusive or obnoxious, I think that's quickly going to, people are just not going to accept that.
Hey gang, it's Thursday, July 8th. Victoria and listeners, welcome to the Behind the Numbers Daily, an eMarketer podcast made possible by VTEX. I'm Marcus, and today I'm joined by one of our principal analysts. Our VR expert is Victoria Petrok.
Hey, Marcus.
Hello, Victoria. Thanks for hanging out today. Today's fact, pencils are yellow, if you remember them. They're yellow because of Chinese royalty. So pencils come in all sorts of colours, of course, but if you had to pick a standard pencil colour, you'd probably be thinking about that yellow gold colour. That's no accident, apparently. When pencils started to go into mass production in the 1890s, the finest available graphite, not lead, to fill them came from China. Pencil manufacturers wanted everyone to know that they used only the best Chinese graphite, so they painted their pencils yellow, the traditional Chinese colour of royalty. So for young people listening, pencils were early writing implements, and when you made a mistake, you would use the eraser on the other end of the pencil to smudge your mistake across the entire page, now being left with a more obvious record of your error and with a million eraser shavings that you would then bat away repeatedly onto your neighbour. That's how pencils worked, right, Victoria?
Yeah, now I feel like if you get an eraser that's a little too old, it makes a big mess, so...
Yeah. They're a disaster.
I just don't think it's ever been a perfect model.
No. It's never been ideal. Although I did learn that the average pencil can draw a line 35 miles long with one pencil. That would be like going for New York people from One World Trade to Yankee Stadium, back to One World Trade, back to Yankee Stadium, and then down to Central Park if you did a big line. I don't know why you would do that, but you could do that. If you wanted to.
You'd need a lot of sharpeners. You'd need a lot of sharpeners along the way, I think.
You would. 17 times, apparently. The average pencil. I've wasted a lot of my day, let's be honest. And yours, too. I'm so sorry about that, but it happened. Today's real topic, virtual reality ads. All right, so from mid-June, Facebook started testing and displaying ads within its Oculus virtual reality headsets, initially appearing in the game Blast On. Users could click an ad and open it in Oculus's web browser or save it for later. This should have been expected given that Facebook's business model is ads, and last year the company required all Oculus device users to create a linked Facebook account, since Oculus VR ads are served based on data from your Facebook profile. But Victoria, as we were joking about before, it didn't last long. Shortly after the trial started, Resolution Games, who makes Blast On, said they'd stop showing ads after a backlash from players. Your initial reaction to Facebook testing virtual reality ads and the almost immediate backlash?
Right. Well, I don't think it's any surprise that Facebook's trying to slip ads into the Oculus ecosystem. Yeah. I think that people are a little bit sort of horrified right now, especially given what's been going on with all the, privacy backlashes. And you already have so many people that are suspicious of Facebook and what they're doing with their data. I think it's just, I don't think it's a surprise, but I think people are very displeased, especially because the Oculus ecosystem, or a lot of the games on that ecosystem, are not inexpensive. So you're already paying for your games, and then to be shown ads within those games, depending on what kinds of ads they are, whether they be billboards or pop-ups or different kinds of offers to buy or click on different things. I think that's sort of adding insult to injury in terms of having to pay $30, $40, $50 for the game already and then be served ads inside of it. So it's not, I was not surprised when the game developer made the announcement that, wasn't exactly a fit for their game at this point after right. agreeing to the trial.
Yeah. Although it seems like gaming companies will have an incentive to figure this out, since they will get a share of the revenue from ads in their app. So the company that makes the game, Resolution Games, they did a very good job of not saying, no, we'll never do that again, but maybe it's not for us right this second. So leaving the door open.
Right.
In terms of, you mentioned privacy, let's talk about that for a second, because when it comes to privacy, Facebook says users can hide specific ads or ones from certain advertisers within virtual worlds, and that its privacy policy remains the same. Facebook says it has no plans to target ads based on more sensitive data like movement data, height and weight information, or voice recordings from the device. This data, it claims, remains solely on users' devices. But as Adi Robertson of The Verge notes, and Victoria, you've mentioned to me before in your coverage about VR, he says, quote, Oculus Quest headsets are a goldmine of information about you. They capture precise head and hand motion, pictures of your surroundings through tracking cameras, and the microphone audio from Facebook's voice command system. Future headsets will likely include even more intimate features like eye tracking, which could offer incredibly precise metrics on what captures your attention in VR. Close quote. Victoria, this sounds like a privacy nightmare waiting to happen. No?
Absolutely. I think giving users the option to block ads from certain companies or turn off personalized ads, that's all well and good. But the bottom line is, even when you do that on regular Facebook, you still get ads. And the company is still potentially collecting data about you. And we saw that this week, I think it was with Amazon. Basically now with its Sidewalk Labs, they're going to start switching features on everyone's Amazon Echo that is going to sort of create this like mesh neighborhood network. And these devices, they have the capability to do things we don't even know that they can do. And at some point down the line, the manufacturer can decide they're going to use it in some unique, way. We don't even know how they're going to use it yet. So I think one of the Oculus right now is starting to corner the market in terms of virtual reality. And some of the other headsets that were a little more popular a few years ago, like the ones where you could put your smartphone in, Sony's PlayStation VR, those are sort of, for different reasons, sort of kind of fading into the background. And the Oculus devices are sort of ascendant. But I also think that people are going to be wary of using the devices because of their association with Facebook and because of the company's, difficult, I guess, history with privacy. And people really don't really trust the company. And there's no doubt that this is what their business model is. This is how they're making money. They're collecting as much data as they can. It's just going to be, a question of how it's going to be used in the least objectionable way.
Controversial, yes. To your point about privacy, a shockingly low 3% of US adults said they trust Facebook with their personal information. That was from a survey done last summer. It was eMarketer and BizRate Insights survey. You mentioned the fact that Facebook does seem to be performing a lot better in the VR headset world than maybe some of its competitors. One of the reasons seems to be the price. The Facebook Oculus headset priced around $300. HTC, who makes the Vive VR headset, they've called Facebook's low-cost consumer headsets. They say that they're artificially subsidized by the company's ad-focused business model. It's basically a loss leader. VR makers are going to need to keep pushing costs down somehow because just 6% of the US population used a VR headset pre-pandemic, 8% do today, and 9% will in the coming years. 9%, I should say, is over 30 million people, mind you, in the US. But still, not the penetration rates that perhaps VR headset people were hoping for. Aside from price, Victoria, what else is driving VR headset growth?
Well, I think the form factor, number one, the fact that some of these headsets are no longer tethered to the computer.
Right.
We're going to, people can move around with them. They have better battery life. We don't really have to worry about kind of like moving the wrong way and dragging your whole computer down with the headset. I think that there has been more, now that things have sort of consolidated around Oculus, or Oculus is gaining momentum, you have more developers that are interested in developing for that platform. And then you have all the different things that have been going on in the world, for the past year with this pandemic, where you have people who are inside a lot more, looking for interesting things to do, participating, maybe wanting to play some VR games, try them out, participating in virtual reality events, experimenting a little. I think it's a combination of both the technology sort of coming together or consolidating around this Oculus platform, and then, or at least on the consumer side, and then some of the things going on in the world with the pandemic and with, the novelty of this. I do think the advertising is going to be a little bit of a deterrent to continued growth. I think the founder of Oculus at the time he sold it to Facebook promised there would be no advertising. And now I think a lot of people feel sort of betrayed by that. And they have to reconcile the fact that Facebook is now going to probably more tightly integrate this with its ad-supported model.
Right. It's interesting because VR makers have messed about with product placements, promotional tie-ins, sponsorships before, but on a small scale. This time it's different because it's Facebook, so everyone pays attention. Facebook also said they're testing new ad formats unique to VR. What might those look like, Victoria?
I'm not quite sure. All I can think of is, I think about that game. Remember Second Life a couple of years ago, or more than a couple of years ago, where, you were inside the world. It wasn't quite VR, but there were billboards. There might be product placements. There might be, different things to click on that may take you to the ability to purchase different products for maybe outside or inside the game. I think it might start with, I hope that it would start with maybe billboards or different kinds of things inside the game rather than advertisements like pop-ups or something that's going to interrupt your gameplay or interrupt your experience, because that would just kill it. I think that's why, some of our voice devices like the smart speakers don't have advertising on them now, because of the interruptive nature of some of the ads.
Right.
So I'm hoping that the ads would be sort of unobtrusive, visual elements within a virtual world that maybe people see them, brand awareness, maybe they could act on them in different ways, but that don't interrupt the flow of the game, because that would just be death to have to all of a sudden be playing your, like Beat Saber or what you're playing, and then have the whole experience interrupted by like, boom, here's an ad for, deodorant or something. So I think, I hope they're not going that way. They say they're not, but I see all kinds of weird, intrusive web ads still. So it remains to be seen.
That's one of the big questions, isn't it? Which app genres work well? Which game genres will work well with an ad-based model? My first thought was IKEA furniture in like the Sims game, which I think they did some kind of tie-up, because I was looking whether that existed. I think they might have done some kind of tie-up with the just original kind of PC version. But to be able to see Crate and Barrel furniture in the virtual room whilst you're playing The Sims and see it like almost to scale, I thought could be something that would be unique to VR. Because I feel like everyone's first thought in terms of ads in VR is those kind of flashing display and pop-up ads like in the movie Ready Player One, if anyone's seen that.
I hope not. I mean, brands have been doing tie-ups with video games for a very long time. So for instance, you might have a certain brand of car featured in a car racing video game, or you might have certain brands of food or electronics or whatever sort of featured product placements. And that happens in movies, that happens in a lot of different existing media. So I think that might be the most palatable way of doing the advertising. But if it's going to be interruptive, if it's going to be anything that distracts the player from the game experience or degrades the game experience, or it comes off as being too pushy or too promotional or too intrusive or obnoxious, I think that's quickly going to, people are just not going to accept that.
Not going to tolerate that.
Especially when they're paying, a lot of money for the game to begin with.
Yes. Because VR is so immersive, you could assume that ads will be exceptionally intrusive because of that. But you could also say maybe not. Podcasts are said to be a more immersive medium. CTV is said to be more kind of lean back and more of an engaging experience. And it seems like folks are more receptive to ads in those environments, as long as they're done well, as long as they fit in and they're not bombarding the user where they do interrupt the experience.
You can also forward fast 15 seconds in podcasts. When you hear an ad, you just push that button and it's gone. And I don't know if you can do that in VR. If you're actually in the world trying to do whatever you're trying to do in the VR world.
Can you avoid them?
You avoid them?
Great question. Yeah. So my final question, Victoria, for the lead story here is, will augmented reality ads be more enticing, because it seems like every time I read an article about VR, the conclusion that people come to at the end is VR is interesting and it's gaining some steam, and companies like Facebook have thousands of people working on some of their initiatives. But AR is where marketers are probably going to spend a lot of their attention, and not so much on the kind of futuristic VR initiatives. What are your thoughts on where marketers are or should be focusing their attention when it comes to VR and AR?
Well, I don't necessarily think marketers are going to be focusing completely on AR and foregoing VR. If there's a way to do, like we talked about, a product placement or something that's very, like built into a VR experience, that's unobtrusive, that's, like maybe it can be customized to the users, maybe it's adding value, maybe it's a brand placement. I see advertisers pursuing those kinds of things in VR. But right now, I really do see more focus on AR. And the one thing about the AR ads is that they're very interactive, they're very practical, and they enable users to actually to do something that's sort of productive. So for instance, you might have an AR ad where you can try on makeup or try on sunglasses or have some kind of experience where you can see how you're going to look in a certain environment or with a certain accessory. I think there's an AR app where you can actually see how a potential tattoo might look on you before you get the tattoo. And the company, maybe there's a tattoo company that's sponsoring that. So there's a lot of utility in some of the AR ads right now that I think makes them appealing as that medium takes off. And I don't think we see the utility in the VR yet. So I do think that advertisers are pursuing or exploring AR and shoppable AR a lot more right now, because it's a little further down the path of, customers see utility. They're more willing to accept that right now than they are, some intrusive experience in their VR, in their kind of private VR headset, which is new. It's going to take some getting used to. Like now somebody's intruding not only on my real world, but on my virtual world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that's it for the first half. Time now for the halftime report, where we summarize the key takeaway or takeaways from the lead story in a matter of seconds. Victoria, what's your key takeaway or takeaways from the first half?
I think the one thing that we can take away from this is that we may see a divergence in models for VR content. I think we may start seeing premium models where people pay for VR games and they're ad-free. And maybe if there's a market for the same games and people don't want to pay for them, they're going to have to accept the ad-supported versions. The same way we're seeing with streaming services right now, where you pay more, you get no ads, and you want free content, then you have to sit through the ads. That's the way I see the VR advertising playing out.
Yeah, ads in free games is much more likely to be expected. All right, so we've got time for the lead story. We say goodbye to Victoria. Unfortunately, Victoria, thank you so much for hanging out with us for the first half.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Of course, it's time now for In Other News, but first, a quick word from our sponsor, VTEX. Retail's next competitive threat may come from a business model or channel that didn't even exist a few months ago. This modern dynamic requires companies to adapt quickly, pivoting business seemingly overnight, something traditional commerce platforms just can't support. There's a new enterprise commerce platform on the rise, one that's fast, flexible, doesn't require 9 months and $1 million to get up and running. Go to vtex.com/emarketer to learn more. Folks, we are back. It's time now for In Other News. Joining us today for the second half of the show, In Other News, it's Paul Werner, our principal analyst covering TV and video.
Hey, great to be here as always.
Thanks for hanging out, sir. So, today in Other News, how much time do Americans spend streaming on their television? Will Disney Plus and Netflix introduce ads? And YouTube TV is launching an add-on package for sports fans. Story 1. Streaming accounts for about a quarter of Americans' time spent watching TV, according to a new Nielsen report. That 26% for streaming is just ahead of broadcast TV, but still some way behind the amount of time spent watching cable, 39%. Streaming gained 6 points from last year, and Nielsen says that streaming could grow to make up a third of time spent with TV next year, notes Insider Intelligence analyst Nina Getson. Those numbers are only counting streaming on TVs, not other devices. Paul, your thoughts on this new report from Nielsen, the gauge, I think they're calling it?
Well, I think Nielsen has been taking a long time coming around to the fact that they need to measure more than just linear TV through their traditional panels. I mean, this is a 100-year-old company, and it's had trouble reinventing itself for the way people watch TV today. This is a step in the right direction. I think that not taking into account other devices is going to limit the extent to which this is truly representative of the way people watch, but definitely a step in the right direction.
Nielsen also measured which streaming services account for the most time spent. Netflix and YouTube tied for the most with 6% each, then Hulu with 3%, Prime Video with 2%, and Disney Plus with 1% of time spent streaming with a TV. Story 2, will Disney Plus and Netflix introduce ads? Disney's boss, Bob Chapek, recently said that its 1.5-year-old streaming service, Disney Plus, won't be adding ads to its service anytime soon. He didn't rule it out, though, but did offer more of a not right now, thanks. MoffettNathanson Research thinks, given the fact that Nielsen says Netflix captures the most streaming minutes, as I just mentioned in my last story, Netflix would be best positioned to capture the emerging AVOD, advertising video on demand market, if they embrace ads, an AVOD market that MoffettNathanson estimates will approach $8 billion this year and $11 billion next year. Paul, at this point, Disney Plus and Netflix, will they introduce ads at some point soon?
I'm going to say yes and no. Yes to Disney Plus, no to Netflix.
Oh,
I think.
Tell me more.
Well, Disney Plus.
Tell me more.
First off,
like, did he have a car?
Disney has been in the business of selling advertising for an eternity, and it wouldn't be too much of a pivot for the company to incorporate some kind of ad tier into this subscription service the way HBO recently did. The fact that Bob Chapek, as you noted, Marcus, is not ruling it out, it's a very sort of soft denial at this point, suggests
right.
to me that they're probably and almost certainly thinking about it. Netflix, on the other hand, has resisted this and done it very vocally and forcefully. I know we've had a lot of conversations on this podcast. In fact, devoted an entire episode to whether or not Netflix will include ads in the future. The fact that they recently launched this e-commerce initiative, which when I first heard about it, I thought it might be just a little bit of an ancillary thing. But now the more I kind of turn it over in my head, the more I think this could actually be something that produces substantial revenue. I've said for a long time that Netflix at some point will have to do something different. And this actually could be it. And maybe advertising is not that one thing that they need to do to differentiate themselves or to give themselves another revenue stream.
Yeah. On the Disney point, Disney's boss did say the bump from $7 a month to $8 a month for Disney Plus did little to affect churn, so there is no rush for ads. They can still increase that price because they came in really low. With regards to Netflix, nearly 2 years ago, CEO Reed Hastings said, if you want to succeed in online ads, you can't just have a little data. MoffettNathanson, though, thinks that Netflix doesn't need the hyper-targeted ad capabilities that drive online platforms. As you mentioned, in the short term, it looks like they're focusing on their new online merch store instead. Research company MoffettNathanson estimates it could hit $3 billion in revenue for Netflix from that store by 2025. That would be 6% of Netflix overall business, and that $3 billion would be half the money that Disney make from their consumer products division. But AVOD, it's only going up. US time spent watching AVOD grew 200% year on year, May 2020 to May 2021, says TVision. AVOD was up 200%, SVOD 100%, time spent watching linear TV down 13%. And Paul, I think this final number really kind of sums things up. For me, Adweek Morning Consult poll, 49% of people saying that they're most interested in subscribing to a streaming service offering an ad-supported option for cheaper versus the 22% who said that they mostly want a streaming service offering an ad-free option for a higher price. So plenty of room for those ad-supported offerings as people try to save money on their streaming entertainment. Story 3, live streaming TV service YouTube TV is launching a $20 add-on package for sports fans. The new 4K Plus package gets you, surprise, 4K resolution live streaming. They catch you off guard, don't they? The ability to record games as well is part of that and play them back offline. So the 4K and the recorded games is what you get for the $20 extra. We estimate that YouTube TV has 10 million viewers, 11 million next year, 12 million by 2023. That's good enough for about 4% of the US population. Paul, I heard this and I thought, on top of the $65 I already have to pay, I'm not so sure. That said, during the playoffs, especially when I can get the Lakers games during the regular season, but when I want to watch the playoffs, they're on different networks and different teams. So I would subscribe to something like a YouTube TV for an extra $20 to be able to record the games. As a sports fan, that sounds quite nice.
Yeah, I'm skeptical of this. I get your point about the offline, but I think the number of people who will take advantage of that, especially with regard to sports, is probably not that big.
Yeah.
And I don't actually know whether YouTube TV has built-in DVR. So if it allows you to record, whether it's, whether you have to watch online or offline, is probably not a deal breaker. $20 seems very high to me. I don't think people make decisions based on small increments in picture quality, which is what the difference between HD and 4K is. In fact, in some tests, it's really not even perceptible. And other aspects than resolution, like HDR, have more of an impact on how people perceive that picture quality. So bottom line for me is $20 is too much for two features, namely resolution and offline viewing, that I don't think are extremely important to a lot of consumers.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think for me it works. For most people it probably won't. And to support what you just said, Insider Intelligence's Nina Getson was pointing out that US adults care less about high resolution than they do about price. 56% of people said that high resolution was important. That 56 is versus the 84% that said they cared about cost. That was from November 2019 Nielsen survey. YouTube, she says, though, may not be going after the pay TV people, not trying to pull those to YouTube TV. Maybe they're looking to pick up those cord cutters who are just floating around in space without a TV package, and maybe they can convince them. But you're right, I think the price is going to be too steep for a lot of folks. I'm just obsessed with the Lakers and will pay literally any amount of money to watch them lose.
And just a quick caveat on that data point that you cited about people's perceptions. So the 56% who picked resolution as something that's important to them, that wasn't even necessarily related to 4K. It was just simply the idea of resolution, whether it's HD or 4K.
Right.
So,
good point.
I don't think that that's really going to be something that tips the scales. And as far as you valuing the offline, let's just say that that's one of the many, many ways in which you are different from the rest of the world, Marcus. And that's why we love you.
Thanks, Paul. I felt a bit like a backhanded compliment, but I'll take it. Thanks so much for joining us, Paul. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, pleasure as always.
And thank you to Victoria, who edits the show. Thank you to everyone listening. We'll see you guys tomorrow for the Behind the Numbers weekly listen, the eMarketer podcast made possible by VTEX.